Well, that year went really fast, don't you think? And here we are again at one of my favorite services. I think I say that 52 times a week, though, because we have just read the story where Thomas does something incredibly reasonable. And for that, he received, for all of time, the label Doubting Thomas. And in church circles, I've noticed the label doubting is not usually seen as a positive thing. But I mean, think about it. After Jesus dies, his spirit visits his friends, except for Thomas, because he's somewhere else. Jesus shows his friends the wound in his hand and his side. And when the friends later tell Thomas they have seen Jesus, Thomas does not believe them because, let's be honest, what they told him was unbelievable. Thomas, quite reasonably, just wants to see the same proof that his friends had already seen. But in spite of that, Thomas is forever known as Doubting Thomas, casting his integrity into question and making him the perpetual butt of sermons, at least once a year. But I'm going to say thank you, Thomas. In the church, faith has usually been seen as the opposite of doubt. And the church is all about faith, right? But and this is actually your fault, not mine, but you hired a minister who was also a scientist, right? That's on you. So, as you might expect, I have no problem with doubt. Doubt is what fuels science. It fuels a great deal of social innovation. In fact, for people like me, doubt even fuels faith. For me, doubting is a very good thing. There's power in doubt. But I want to be clear up front that when I say doubt is a good thing, I mean positive, open minded doubt. Sometimes doubt strays into skepticism and negativity and pessimism, and I'm not saying that's good. But doubt and pessimism are completely different things. So, really, the problem boils down to what kind of doubt we carry. Negative, closed doubt is just dismissive, whereas positive, open doubt is curious and searching. Example, negative doubt, also called pessimism, says things like, nothing will work, why bother, who cares? Positive doubt says things like, I wonder if that's really true. Might there be another way to do this? Or the perpetual question, whose voice is missing from this conversation? Negative doubt just shuts down conversation. Positive doubt can take us to new places. It's a lot like the word cynicism, actually, which is strongly related to doubt, because the word cynicism carries two different and basically contradictory meanings. In modern usage, cynicism usually means a distrust of everyone's motives. It means assuming everyone is motivated by greed, vanity, self interest, and therefore nobody should be trusted. Modern cynicism is negative doubt wrapped in self righteousness, basically. But the word cynicism also refers to a Greek philosophy made popular around the 4th century BC. Followers believed that happiness is achieved through virtue, self sufficiency, living with nature. They rejected social conventions like wealth, power, and fame. Ancient cynics were not dismissing anyone. They stood against the status quo and relied on their own sense of self and value. And I would call that a positive sense of doubt. I mean, as a very modern example, society tells you you need a cooler car and a new phone, right? But a modern cynic in that sense would say, no, that's okay. I'm good. You don't need this stuff. A modern cynic in the positive sense says, I don't need vast wealth to be happy. A cynic says, I don't have to be like everyone else. I can be myself and I can be happy. That's a positive sense of doubt. Positive doubt is really just standing against the status quo and using your own brain, which is why most social innovation comes from doubt. I mean, consider this. The doubter was the first person to say, wait a minute, why can't women vote anyway? That was a doubter. That was someone who did not just follow the status quo. They asked a legitimate question about why women couldn't vote. To me, this is positive doubt in action. The doubter who first said, hang on a minute, if we are all children of God, do we really have to murder each other? That was a doubter. Positive doubt is fundamental to progress precisely because it challenges the status quo. as did, may I remind you, Jesus. Jesus was a cynic in the ancient sense of the term. Jesus was himself a doubter, a positive doubter. You're looking at me funny. Well, I'm going to remind you society says people with wealth get all the breaks. What did Jesus say? Blessed are the meek, or the poor in spirit, and the meek shall inherit the earth. That's doubt. Because the logic of the day was if you got money, you can do what you like. Jesus flipped that over, right? Now, before we continue, I need a very short rant because there's so much talk about inclusion these days in the church and in our society. We often lift up and celebrate groups and voices that traditionally have been ignored. And that's great, of course. And today is a great day to lift up a group that has been excluded from the church, namely scientists. The church has often shut the door to scientists, mainly because science embraces doubt and these people are radical enough to think for themselves. I've shared a few examples before, Galileo and other famous ones, but today I want to lift up Giordano Bruno, born in Naples in 1548. And as was common in those days, nobody was just a scientist. Bruno was a scientist, but also a philosopher, mathematician, a cosmologist. And Bruno disagreed with the common belief that the Earth was the center of the universe. He believed the Earth revolved around the sun. What a radical, eh? Perhaps more provocatively, Bruno believed the universe was infinite and therefore had no center anyway. But what really got him into trouble with the church was his belief that distant stars were actually suns, and some of them would have their own planets, and some of those planets might even have life on them. This was known at the time as cosmic pluralism. And that idea threatened, to the church anyway, to reduce the importance of humanity in the universe. And so, naturally, in the year 1600, Bruno was burned alive by the church. And the pyre he was burned on actually had a lot of his own books and writings at the base, which is, I do appreciate the symbolism anyway. Of course, today in 2026, even school children know that what Bruno said was correct. As I said, the church has historically had a big problem with doubters, even though we follow one, even to the point of violating the Ten Commandments to get rid of them. Fortunately, doubters are a persistent bunch, and we just don't go away. Incidentally, Bruno is sometimes depicted looking a little more like that, and any similarities between him and Obi-Wan Kenobi are in your own mind. But scientists have not been very welcome in the church precisely because the bread and butter of science is doubt. And the church has always had a big problem with that. Except in this church, of course, where everyone is free to bring your doubts, your questions, concerns, and we'll kind of share them together in open space as much as we can. You can bring your own ideas in here. And I often wonder, why is negative doubt, also called pessimism, sometimes called constant complaining, so popular in our society anyway? And let's be honest, even in the church from time to time. And one reason may be that we often hear predictions of the future that turn out to be wrong. And so we're all sort of being trained to doubt what we hear. And that's actually kind of reasonable, don't you think? Consider these predictions. I can't read that maybe. In 1903, when Henry Ford was trying to get people to support his project, some banker wouldn't support the project, saying, quote, "The horse is here to stay, the automobile is a fad," and did not invest in the Ford Motor Company. In 1946, a producer at 20th Century Fox said, "Television won't last. People will get tired of staring at a cardboard box or plywood box every night." Other predictions said if television ever became successful, future generations would not know how to read. In 1984, Apple brought out its first commercialized mouse for the computer. Predictions were, nobody wants to use this thing. Hands up, how many of us use a computer without a mouse ever? Anyone? Yeah, two of us. Great. When people make predictions like that, doubt can be a valuable power to have. But we need to embrace doubt. And again, negative doubt shuts down conversation. Positive doubt opens up conversations. And today, sadly, We are also invited to celebrate Earth Sunday. Is there a connection between Earth Sunday and doubt? Of course, it's called climate denial or other things. Climate skepticism, call it that. Climate skeptics are either people who are skeptical about the reality of climate change, or they believe in climate change but are skeptical that we should actually attempt to do anything about it. One reason that people are skeptical about climate change is climate predictions have failed in the past. As a great example, in 2009, at a UN climate change conference, Al Gore said, quote, "The entire North Pole ice cap during some of the summer months will be completely ice-free within the next 5 to 7 years," which did not happen. But of course, Gore's message wasn't exactly completely wrong. He just had the timing wrong. It's now predicted that will happen in 2035, and I think we're on track for that to be reality. But clearly, statements like the one Gore made can lead to doubt and cynicism, and I get that, causing people to doubt the speaker's motives rather than facing reality. And part of the problem, of course, is scientific knowledge is usually incremental and evolving, but citizens want firm, simple answers that they can do right now. To quote from the book Evolving Christianity by Paul Shepard, since the 1950s, a consensus has emerged that recognizes that adding chemicals to the Earth's atmosphere causes changes to the atmosphere. The earliest researchers focused on rising atmospheric temperature. By the 70s, this understanding had grown into the broader recognition of the changing state of the atmosphere. It was then called global warming because increasing greenhouse gases in the atmosphere increase atmospheric temperatures. Greenhouse gases are well mixed in the atmosphere, therefore the impact is global, hence the term global warming. But as more countries started to invest in research, we learned a lot more detail, including the detail that even though average temperatures are going up, in some places temperatures actually go down. And moreover, there was a vast interest in not just temperature, but other interesting aspects like storms, hurricanes, winds, extreme events, flooding. So this became a thing we called climate change because it was not just about warming. Climate change goes far beyond temperature. And then the next phase of this is the science behind climate change is well established. So now research is focusing on implications of climate change for humans. These impacts include the ability to grow food, to access clean water. This phase is what we now call climate justice. It takes climate change as a given and explores the impact on humanity. Predictions about rising temperatures and shrinking ice caps have been off in their timing, but we are all certainly seeing the growing inequalities around the world in terms of the impact of climate change on human beings. According to the UN, over the decade 2010 to 2020, weather-related events displaced an estimated 23 million people on average every year, leaving many more vulnerable to poverty. Most refugees come from countries that are most vulnerable and least ready to adapt to the impacts of climate change. Though climate science has evolved a lot recently, and even if you don't believe in climate change, the impacts of climate change, particularly the impacts on the poorest people of the world, are undeniable. People are being displaced from their homes and their homelands. Entire communities are being affected. Global inequality is on the rise. These are lived realities, whatever you think of the science. And we've faced environmental crises before. I assume some of us remember the crises in the 70s we called the ozone hole, depicted. Humans had been releasing ozone-depleting substances into the atmosphere since about the 1930s, including CFCs, solvents, propellants. And the hole wasn't actually a hole, but a drastic thinning of ozone near the polar caps. This matters because ozone protects humans from some aspects of ultraviolet radiation. This led to the Montreal Protocol in 1987, which banned the use of certain chemicals. But the point of me telling this story is that crisis was solved simply by forcing manufacturers to change the chemicals they put into refrigerators and other products. Manufacturers had to change their processes. And this is largely working. Ozone hole is on track to self-repair at around the year 2045. But the reason I bring it up is that environmental problem was solved with technology. I mean, which of us made any actual change? Just when you went to buy a fridge, the new fridge you got had different coolants in it. That solution did not involve a change in our own behavior. Today, however, is different because today climate change is definitely a problem and we have many, many tools to fight it. However, the most effective tools call on us to change our own behavior. Now, you've already heard a few sermons from me giving actual details, but the short version, we need to eat differently, we need to share differently, we need to imagine differently, we need to care for each other and the planet differently. And while some technological advancements are helping, of course, real solutions involve behavioral change. Our choices when we shop, our habits, things we call our way of life. And here's where positive doubt can be really effective. Because we can ask questions like, are there other ways to live? Are there other ways to share so we don't all need to own the same things? Are there other ways to care for the world? What would it mean to love the earth more deeply and all humanity? And the question that never goes away, whose voice is missing from this conversation? So sadly for you, we have moved long past the day when a sermon like this ended with me telling you to go home and change your light bulbs. Today, we're invited to consider how to share, how to be community differently, how we care. We're invited to deepen our understanding of the word love and justice. But maybe step one that we can all do today is to embrace the power of doubt. You know, Thomas did not refuse to believe. Thomas just wanted to see. He just wanted to see reality as it was. The enemy of faith is not doubt. The enemies of faith are dishonesty, and the big one is indifference. The enemy of faith is a refusal to see the world as it really is, and then to get on with it. Faith is not about not having doubt. Faith is about how we choose to live our lives, even when we do not have all the answers. And even when we have answers we don't really like. We need to embrace the power of doubt. Embrace that type of doubt that leads to new life. Amen.